Hello, I'm Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, I'm just going to do a simple practice paper for paper 1. This is not a past paper. You must be doing a lot of past papers by now, so it'll be a change for you to do something beyond past papers. From time to time, you should practice questions that are not included in past papers because if nothing else, it helps to break that mindset that doing past papers is enough to prepare for the upcoming exam. Psychology requires very dedicated study. You have to learn everything from the textbook, solve past papers, and be prepared for any type of question that can come in the paper. If you've really been doing past papers, you must have noticed that questions are not repeated. In psychology, new questions are formulated. So you should practice not to say that what is on this video is only going to come in the paper. Now, don't develop that mindset. This is not a guess paper or anything. This is just for practice. As I always say, you have to go beyond reading and rereading the content of the textbook and actually test yourself by answering questions. So, paper practice, answer writing is the way to go, and best if you do not restrict yourself to only practicing past papers. The more you practice different types of questions, the more it's going to help you answer your coming paper. Okay, so let's begin with the first question. As always, as I do in all my videos, as I answer the questions, I'll keep sharing some practical tips and answering some FAQs on different types of questions which come. And of course, I'll write down sample answers. These are not fixed answers that you have to only write this way in the paper. I'll give you some idea on how you can formulate your answers. Okay, the first question is from the study by Dement and Kleitman. Explain one difference between EEG and EOG technology. Okay, I've been practicing some of these questions with my students, and some of the students have come up with this argument for the question that in the textbook that they are learning from, EOG technology hasn't been covered, which is true. In one of the textbooks, it's not covered. In the other textbook, it's just touched upon. And in the third textbook, it is explained really well. Know one thing that in the paper, when it comes to the formal Cambridge examination, questions are going to be formulated from original research papers of the core studies. So the examiner is not going to consider whether the topic was covered in your textbook or not. Accordingly, they should give marks. That is not how they are going to mark you. They are going to mark you for giving the correct answer. So these sort of arguments are only going to distract you. Instead of that, be ready with all types of answers. That's why it is insisted that you read the original papers. Otherwise, if you find the original papers very difficult to understand, which they are not, I would say personally no. But still, if you find them difficult to understand, it's okay. Then read multiple textbooks instead of just one. That's all what I can suggest. Otherwise, you're going to lose marks on these type of answers. You can check in past papers yourself. I hope by now you have noticed that many times there are questions like these which you will not find an answer to in your textbook. Okay, when it comes to EEG technology, electroencephalogram, it helps to measure brainwave activity, or it helps to measure which stage of sleep a person is in. Whereas EOG technology, electrooculography, helps to check the directions of eye movements, any fixations, and the speed of movements. It's not important to give the full forms of these terms because you just to give the difference. They are not asking you to explain what the technology is, so you can just talk about the difference. So one way of writing the answer would be EEG helps measure brain waves, whereas EOG helps measure eye movement direction and pace. It can be as simple as this, and this is sufficient for 2 marks. Never go by length when judging whether it deserves 1 or 2 marks, so don't go by sentences. Those are rules of thumb, like I always say. How they are going to mark is you have mentioned what EEG measures, that's 1 mark, even if it's coming within the same sentence. You have mentioned what EOG measures, direction and pace of movements. Comes within the same sentence, but it's a different point. It's talking about EOG, not EEG. So for two separate points, two unique points, you will get 2 marks. Okay, let's look at the next question. This is continuing from Dement and Kleitman. Explain why the electrodes were tied behind the head of participants when they slept. There are multiple reasons for this. Usually students have a tendency, I don't know, they find it easy. They always think about ethics. The first thing, methodological thinking or critical thinking is quite less. That is what I have found. So of course, over time we develop it in the class, but initially when students come, they're always focusing on ethics. So for this question, many students would say that this is to prevent harm to participants. Think about it methodologically. If participants get tied in the wires, it's not so much harm. I mean, exactly like what will happen. Some students go to the extent of saying that shocks will be experienced by participants. Why will they experience shocks? Through EEG wires. So, one thing is don't focus too much on ethics. The other thing is don't make up things which you don't know about. Do you know that EEG wires can run electric shocks to a person or not? So don't mix up something from one study from the other study. Such points are not credit worthy. I know I'm deviating a little from the video, the content, but I just want to say this because I'm noticing this a lot in many students when they come for the first time for classes. Psychology paper, they treat as if it is some everyday conversation or some gossip or something is going on, or it's about personal opinions more than anything. So lots of answers I see in which students will mix their personal opinions or what they have understood incorrectly from the chapter which is not included in it. Psychology is very scientific. What they are giving you as facts, you are to interpret those things only. So, for the example of shocks running through EEG wires, is that something you know for a fact? Is that specified in the paper or in the textbook that shocks can run through the wires? If it is not, then that is something that you are assuming will be there. You have either drawn inspiration from Milgram and now you think from any wires or any electrode shocks can run, or when you were reading the study somehow you started imagining something that, oh, it might be dangerous to sleep with wires, then you're thinking why it would be dangerous and you've come up with shocks. To some students this will sound ridiculous, but this is actually what is happening. Many students are coming up with such answers. So overall in psychology, don't have that perspective that you can write whatever comes to your mind. You have to take it as seriously as you take any other subject. So unverified things, uh, things which you are imagining must be happening, if you're going to write those in the paper, especially in the ethics type of things, these things come up a lot. You are really going to lose marks very badly because they are not worthy of any credit. Unsubstantiated claims are not worthy of any credit. So first of all, come out of thinking about ethically for everything, think methodologically. If participants get entangled in the wires, what I mean by methodologically, how will the procedure of the study suffer? So if they get entangled in the wires, one possibility is that the wires can come out of the machine, because when they're getting entangled accidentally they might pull out the wires, and that would stop the EEG recording. So EEG recording would have to discontinue and the study would have to be stopped. It would defeat the purpose of the study. So that's one reason you can think of. The other reason, again procedural, is that if we want to make the study realistic, we want to keep the task realistic. So if participants are going to get entangled in the wires, they're going to get very disturbed when they are sleeping. They're going to become uncomfortable. So keeping the wires away from them assures that to a great extent they're able to sleep in their natural sleep posture. Usually how they must be sleeping in their homes, they're able to sleep that way. So it adds some realism to the study. It gives some ecological validity to the study. So for this answer, you can take one of those points, either to prevent EEG recording from stopping accidentally and maintaining the validity of the study, or second, to keep their sleep posture natural, and to enhance the ecological validity of the study. These are two reasons why they have tied the electrodes at the back of the head. If you just leave it at, like, because in some textbooks it's mentioned that so that they don't get entangled. So if you just leave it at that, that's an incomplete point. You need to develop reasoning further and just show why that was important. So not only what they have done, but why they have done. That also needs to be included. So again, I'm just writing one of these answers. Tying the electrodes ensured that participants would not get entangled with their wires during sleeping. So they would not be disturbed and would maintain a natural posture increasing ecological validity of findings to an extent. Okay, let's look at the next question. This is now from the study by Hassett et al. Explain why repeated measures design could not be used in the study. This is one question which can come on paper 2 also. Actually, some questions overlap between the papers. When it comes to repeated measures design not being used, here this is where your fundamentals of research methods count. Have you understood what designs are based on? Then you will be able to answer this question correctly. Designs, repeated measures, independent measures, and matched pairs are based on the manipulation or measurement of the independent variable. So, whenever a question is asked on the design, the first thing that should click in your mind is what was the independent variable of the study. Then your reasoning is correct because your fundamentals are correct. So, if you consider Hassett et al. Study, the independent variable is whether the monkey was a male or a female. So, the simple logic behind this is you cannot have the same monkey serving as males and females. So, how can you have a repeated measures design? Because you want to compare male monkeys prefer whale toys and female monkeys prefer plush toys. How can you have the same monkeys in both the conditions of gender? That's all. Again, when it comes to this question, some students would begin thinking how the monkeys would approach the toys. Some would say order effects, monkeys would get fatigued and all. Even more than that, before you go to order effects and all, why don't you consider the basic? What is the independent variable? The answer lies there. Why complicate your thinking so much? And this also gives you the larger lesson that before coming to your core studies, your research method should be very clear. Then only it makes sense to come to the core studies. Then only you get complete understanding. So here what we can say is since the independent variable was the gender of the monkey, measured as male or female, this design could not be used. The same monkey could not participate in male and female conditions. Okay, so that's for the first page. Let's come to the next one. Let's see how many questions we can cover in this video. So this paper is serial. The next question study in the paper is in the syllabus is Holzel et al. So the next question is from that study. From the study by Holzel et al., state one unexpected result of the study. Now, many students for this, the mistake they make is finding an increase in cerebellum, TPJ, or PCC was an unexpected result. It was not unexpected. The researchers were open to measuring gray matter concentration increase in any area of the brain. So, why would it be unexpected when they are open to seeing brain growth anywhere? So, it's very much expected that other areas besides the hippocampus will also grow. The unexpected result is that they expected the insula to grow, but that did not grow. How you can check for an unexpected result is think about what was the prediction or the hypothesis in the study, what they were aiming to investigate, if nothing else. They were aiming to see whether insula and hippocampus grow as a result of practice of mindfulness. So if one of these areas is not growing, it is not as per their prediction, meaning it's not as per their expectation. So that is the unexpected result of the study. Now, okay, one more thing. When we are writing this answer, we have to be very, very specific. If I say insula did not grow, that's an incomplete answer. For which group were they expecting it to grow? When it was expected to grow, what was their prediction? You have to link to that. You cannot justify 2 marks by writing 3-4 words. Insula did not grow. So always write your answers in a very complete fashion. I say this in every video, but students keep on losing marks there. Okay, so how we can write this answer is one unexpected result was that after 8 weeks of MBSR practice, for this answer you can use the short form, you need not give the full form mindfulness based stress reduction, it's okay. MBSR, meditation practice, the insula did not show an increase in gray matter concentration. Undoubtedly, you will get a mark for saying that the insula did not show an increase, but the second mark you will get for writing for which group and when. So 8-week MBSR group, for that you will get the second mark. If you're just writing insula, you just get 1 mark. Next is explain why this result may have been found. The researchers have clearly stated why they think this result may have been found. So these are the type of questions which really test whether you've been learning your studies completely or not. Otherwise, you can miss out on these type of discussions if you've not read the paper properly, or if you're relying on those tidbit notes which are there on the internet, 2-line notes, which make you very happy because they're just summaries. They don't help you to answer these type of questions. Why this result may have been found is because the insula, according to the researchers, might require more time for showing any increase in GMC, more than 8 weeks, which is what the participants practiced in this study. Again, for just saying that the time was not sufficient, you just get 1 mark. For saying exactly what was the duration of MBSR practice in this study, and then the insula might require more than this specific time which was done in this study, for that you will get complete 2 marks. So being specific, giving facts and figures, writing complete answers is the way to score marks. So here we can say, since the participants in the experimental group practiced MBSR for only 8 weeks, the insula might have not shown increase more than 8 weeks of practice may be required for the insula to grow. Again, specifying things like MBSR 8 weeks, very important to get full marks. Identify one brain area that showed increase following mindfulness practice other than the hippocampus. This is a very straightforward question. There's not much to discuss in this. You know that there are 4 areas which have shown increase, one of them being the left hippocampus. You can name any of the other 3. The most common question asked here is, does the spelling have to be exact? As far as possible, yes. I know they do not deduct marks very much for spellings. So a little bit the spelling being off is okay. But why not try your best to give the right spelling? But I have come across these answers. This is not to make fun of anybody. This is actually an answer that I have seen. I'm not making this up. Writing things like cerebellum or something like this instead of cerebellum. You think for yourself, will you get credit for writing this instead of writing cerebellum? Do you think this is a spelling mistake or this is like a way of name that has been given to the brain area? So when students tell me, can we compromise on the spelling? First of all, why begin with that intention that my spelling will not be correct? Why not first have it in your mind that let me try to write the spelling correctly? If it goes wrong, okay. Firstly, why to be decided on I'm going to write the incorrect spelling? And secondly, something that's so off the mark, how do you expect marks for this? It might look to the examiner like you're guessing. You don't know the correct name, which does seem that you don't know when you write something like this. Another mistake is to write something like cerebrum and then saying, but I'm close to the original spelling. One, you're not close to the original spelling. Secondly, cerebrum is another part of the brain altogether. So when you say that cerebrum showed an increase, it has a very different meaning from saying that the cerebellum showed an increase. So how can they give you credit when you're naming one part which is totally different from the other? The other question that comes up in this is, can I just write PCC and TPJ? Why would you just write PCC and TPJ? Why would you not name the whole area? This is same like when they ask a one marker on EEG, do I have to write electroencephalogram or do I have to write EEG? Write the full form. Okay, so one other area, okay, also for this one marker type, like I always say, identify, name and all that, you can just write the word, one word also. You don't even need to write the complete sentence. That's up to you. You can say one area that showed increases this, or you can just name the area. So just for brevity's sake, right now I'm just saying posterior cingulate cortex. Okay, you could write temporoparietal junction instead of this, or you could write cerebellum with the correct spelling. Don't write hippocampus, it's already named, or don't think if I add left to the hippocampus becomes something else. No, it still remains what is written in the question, you're just restating that. So you have only 3 options for this answer. The next is explain one methodological problem that would arise if children were used as participants in the study. Now very clearly here they've said methodological problem. So you have to think in the procedure of the study what would be an issue, not what would be an issue in the ethics. Again, that inclination which is the first thing to talk about the ethics, please keep that inclination aside and read the question carefully. Second thing, which is to even when you think about ethics, though it's not related to this question, one thing I've seen students think about ethics, but they think about it because they want to, like I've given the example before, add something of their own logic. When you think about ethics also, hopefully there'll be some question in which I can deal with that. You talk in terms of very specific ethical guidelines and correct interpretation of those guidelines, not whatever you have assumed that guideline is about. So first of all, when they've asked you for methodological, think procedure. There is no hard and fast rule. There's no formula of what answer you can give if they ask you about what if children were used. But common sense dictates that you should think through the steps of the procedure, whichever study is there, and think which part of it would be difficult for children to do, given that they are immature, they are of a young age. So, compared to the adults who were there in the study, if they were children, this would not be as feasible to them as it is for adults. That's all. You just have to think in a very simple way. In this study, there are many parts where children would find difficulty, beginning with the MRI scanner. MRI scanner, one thing is children could become claustrophobic in the scanner, but that goes into the territory of ethics. So there would be psychological harm to them, and that is what we are not to give over here. So instead of that, we can think about lying still in the MRI scanner so that an image of the brain can be taken. A person needs to be still, then only a correct image of the brain can be taken. Would the child be able to lie still in the scanner? That's one thing. Second thing is answering the FFMQ. There can be some words which are difficult for children to understand on the FFMQ, given that it measures things like observation, non judgmental attitude. Children might not be familiar with terms related to these concepts. Or we can even take up a practice of mindfulness. Having to practice 45 minutes of mindfulness every day at home can be very difficult for children, given that their attention span and focus is very underdeveloped. So there are so many things in the wholesale study for which children would not be very suitable candidates. So you can take anything from there. Right now I'll just take the MRI point and I will show you in the MRI why it would be a procedural issue rather than an ethical issue. Of course, ethical issue is also there, but that is not what is being asked right now. Children would find it difficult to lay still in the MRI scanner, as they tend to be hyperactive by nature. This would make it difficult for researchers to accurately scan their brain, reducing validity of findings. Okay, so this is one thing. This completes the Hassett and wholesale study. Let's come to the next page. Now we move towards the cognitive approach. First, they've asked for one assumption of the cognitive approach. Many students remember the assumption correctly, which is the computer analogy assumption. Where they make a mistake is they don't explain it very well. Input, process, output. Those three terms are very important to mention. So I am taking that assumption only, but you have to write it correctly using correct terminology. That's why many times I suggest that the assumptions just memorize them so that you don't go into using casual language while explaining the assumption. So what we can say is one assumption is that the human mind processes information like a computer, moving through stages of input, process, and output. There's nothing else to be done here. It's a very straightforward question. What you've learned in the assumption, you just have to state that. Now, explain how the assumption applies to the memory test procedure of Android study. When they ask you something so specifically, you're not to overlook that. When they say memory test procedure, they mean that. So still, despite them saying this, some students will talk about how the assumption applies to the monitoring of the telephone message, which was the attention part, not the memory part. So failure to read the question, or despite reading the question just because you have prepared one answer, writing that is not going to help. Some students have this belief that if I write something, at least I will get at least 1 mark. That's not how scoring is done. Scoring is done strictly as per the mark scheme, strictly. So if you feel, let me write anything, some marks will be given like out of grace or something. That is not how marking works in A level psychology. You have to focus on memory test procedure. So if you want a strategy to use when you don't know the answer, rather than just writing anything from anywhere in the study, which is not going to help in any way, try writing something from the memory test. Something might click to you when you're thinking about the memory test specifically. That is one way you can try to get a mark rather than writing something irrelevant. So coming to the memory test procedure, just now the assumption that we have written, whenever we write an assumption, we should start breaking it into parts in our mind and thinking how it must be applied. We have said that humans process information, input, process, output. What is the input when it comes to the memory test? What's the process and what's the output? Think that way. So input is the monitored and the incidental information, which was there on the telephonic message. Process is retaining or remembering that information, and output is being able to write that information in the memory test. So as simple as that you can explain. So what you can say is, for the memory test, participants had input information, or we can directly write names of partygoers and places from the telephonic message. They had retained it for processing and gave its output in the form of answers for the memory test. Okay, next question is, explain why the message to be monitored was recorded in a monotone voice. As we know, all this has to do with standardization and control. Ideally, you should take it as a control because that was the intention. If you take it as standardization, then explain well. Some students, they take it as standardization, but they confuse the explanation with control. I have said this many times, I want to reiterate. Control is about preventing extraneous variables from confounding results. Standardization is about maintaining the same procedure for all participants or keeping the procedure consistent. These are two different things. So you don't say something is a control and explain that it was same for everybody. So you're naming it as control and then giving a standardization point. Or you don't say it was standardized and then explain how it was preventing confounding of the dependent variable. Keep the two things separate. So ideally, how you should cover it, I'm going to cover it that way. Ideally, you should talk about how it is a control, in the sense that if the message had any emotional fluctuations in it, then rather than doodling, the emotional tonality of the message would have become the reason for being able to monitor or remember it correctly. So that is how you should put it down. I will not discuss the standardization part here because I don't feel that's the ideal way of answering the question. So I don't want to encourage you to write that answer. Also, whenever we write about control, I always mention this. Counterfactual thinking really helps. What if this control was not there? What would have happened? If you're able to think in that way, that should be very helpful to you to explain your point. That reasoning really helps. Secondly, when you talk about control, you need to specify what is the independent variable and what was the extraneous variable that would be created here, which would have hampered the influence of the independent variable. So in the answer specific to the study, like contextualizing it, you need to explain this would have been the extraneous influence over this independent variable which was then this study. Like when I gave the answer right now, I named doodling, and I named emotional fluctuations. So I've named independent variable and extraneous variable. That's how you write very specific answers. So I'll write it for better understanding. You'll be able to see my point. If the message had emotional fluctuations in it, then the tonality of the message rather than its rather than doodling would become the reason for improved or reduced attention and memory. Or I can say monitoring and memory performance. Okay, so we have covered some more questions here. Those were from the doodling study. Let me see which questions are ahead. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure I'll be able to cover all of the questions in 5 or not. I have a little bit of time now, so let's see how much I can do. From the study by baron-cohen, state 3 differences between the samples of group 2 and 3. Okay, for this study, many times students ask me, do we have to know by rote which participants were in which group? Yes, because this is how the questions come. They just say groups 2 and 3. They're not going to give you any hint of who was in group 2 and who was in group 3. You need to know that. So there are so many differences between them. Like one, group 2 had normal adults, neurotypical adults, whereas group 3 had neurotypical students from Cambridge. Other is the age was different. In group 2 mainly there were middle-aged people, whereas in group 3 young people, because they were students. Total number of participants like 122 in group 2 and 103 in group 3. This especially I remember by heart because it comes in the judgment criteria also, which I had discussed in a recent video. Besides that, the sampling technique of group 2 was gotten through opportunity sampling. Even group 3 was opportunity, but how we can write a difference? Of course, opportunity sampling won't be the difference, it will be the similarity. The difference is that group 2 was from nearby libraries and adult community classes, whereas group 3 was from Cambridge University, the students from there. So those differences, like if you think about the sampling technique, you realize from where they had come, and that becomes a point of difference between the two. Okay, so one difference I would like to give is that group 2 consisted of neurotypical adults from the general population. Group 3 specifically consisted of students. Group 2 included 122 participants. Group 3 included 103. Group 2 was recruited from adult community classes. Group 3 from Cambridge University. Okay, the next question is give one example of a word defined in the glossary given to participants for reference. This is one question which is hardly covered in, I think in 2 of the textbooks it's not there. So students become very upset about this, that this was not there in my textbook, and they vehemently oppose how this question can come. It's then the original paper, so it can come, as I have mentioned before. It is then one of the textbooks also. So either from the original paper or from the textbook, you can learn one or two examples of words which were there in the glossary. You will have to learn them along with their meaning. I would recommend you learn any two words which were there in the glossary along with their definition. All right. So the word I would like to take is flustered. That is most commonly discussed here. So I would say one word was flustered. Okay. Now, just for writing this, of course, I get only 1 mark. It doesn't justify 2 marks. So I need to give the meaning also. Its meaning was given as confused, nervous, and upset. Okay, so that's all I can cover for this video. Now I have to leave. Before I leave, just one or two things I'd like to address. One thing is, I know many students are going to say the paper is tomorrow, so please complete the video. We need the answers by tomorrow. I'm sorry, I will not be able to do that. Even I'm very busy because the paper is there tomorrow. So I don't think I will be able to complete this. I'm not making that promise. I will upload a part 2, but maybe not tomorrow. Not tomorrow or today, definitely. And then many students also tell me, then what's the point of uploading part 2 later? See, I'm not making this video only for you or for your batch. There are many students who are going to give the papers ahead also in Feb, March, May, June. I'm a teacher, my work continues. You are graduating from your A levels, but I am not. So my video is meant for the larger audience. So that's one thing. Secondly, as far as give the mark scheme for this paper, upload the whole paper and all, I have not prepared any mark scheme for this paper. I have not prepared any ready made answers, otherwise I wouldn't be writing them in front of you. So I do not have any mark scheme to share with you. These answers are available in the textbook. You should definitely take the effort to open the textbook, find the answers for yourself instead of relying on ready made answers. So I will not be entertaining that request also. If you have any comments about this video, you want to ask any questions about this video, give me any suggestions of which videos to make further, but please just don't give me a deadline of when to make that video by. You can leave the comments in the comment box below. I do read and answer there. Please do not contact me personally to talk about things in this video, especially near the exam. Students start calling for make this video, that I'm not going to answer such calls. My contact which I give below is just for if you want tuitions from me, only for that purpose you can contact me personally. Okay, so thank you for watching this video and all the best for your papers.